Shalom. Let me get straight into this lesson. But this is a lesson I did about 2 years ago. I was going through some of my older lessons, and I'm going to be reposting them and going into more lessons within lessons to edify the body. So what you see right here has the appearance of a so-called white man, but this actually is a Jake. And this is a hard saying or hard thing to understand for you so-called black only Israelites. You think all the Israelites gonna look like Shaq. You're out of your mind. So let's get into this video because it's like I wanted to go back into this video, and he's going to cover a lot of territory, just the madness of the institution of Christianity, all these things. And this actually was from the Elder Malcolm. He did this lesson 2 years ago, and I just, um, added some stuff to it. But let's get into this. And 1 second. That this is an Israelite right here because he understands. All right, we're not going off so-called skin tone. We know back a long time ago, when we was in our land and so on and so forth, that we had brown flesh. But since the scattering, you're gonna have Israelites that look like heathens, that look like so-called white. Yeah, so this is something that the unlearned of our people don't understand. That you're gonna have Israelites, and matter of fact, let me get this precept of the scattering of the Israelites. Even they had a scattering back in over 2,000 years ago. It was a scattering. Every captivity that they would go into, you would have Israelites scattered all over the place. So it is something. Let me get this precept. I will gather thee from the four winds. I will scatter you, Salakia. Salakia. It says right here. I'm just reading from my other phone. It says the phrase "I will scatter you to the four corners of the earth," and this is Salakia. Isaiah 11 and 12, and it has other reference scriptures as well. Describe the opposite of this, mentioned that God would gather the scattered. Salakia. Isaiah 11 and 12 is going into the deliverance for the elect. I think this Ezekiel chapter 20 and 23, but it's other precepts as well. It says the Lord will scatter the Israelites among the nations and disperse them from the countries. So let's go into this AI. It says the phrase will scatter you to the four corners of the earth is a biblical idiom often associated with the concept of punishment or disburial due to disobedience. It signifies being spread out across the globe, often used in context of the Israelites being dispersed by the Lord. So the Israelites will be dispersed among all nations, and they will come looking like all nations. Yeah, you're gonna have a buck of them that look like so-called black people. You want to use that terminology, but the Israelites are not going to be. They're going to be coming all different shades and shapes, so to speak. So you looking at this guy with a naked eye, you wouldn't be able to tell he's an Israelite until you start hearing the inner parts of hearing him talk, and he understands the doctrine. And you have Israelites that look like so-called white people, and this is again for the people that's on the slow bus. This is a hard thing for them to understand because they still under the impression that all the Israelites gonna look like so-called black people. That's folly. So let's get more into this. Let me get more into this video. White people at different times, they're gonna look like all nations, right? So you have to understand that you have to be very spiritual to understand that. All right? And we know the so-called white man, mostly them, they don't look a certain way, but we saying we got Israelites scattered among them as well. All right, that's why you test the spirit. But this brother is an Israelite, he's scattered. And even that's the book of Nehemiah. Matter of fact, let me get that because the Israelite men was dealing with other nations. This ain't nothing new. So if they was popping other women from other nations, the kids in some cases gonna come out looking like the mother. That's just common sense. Let's go to Nehemiah. And I'm doing this flowing through the spirit. Because Nehemiah cursed him out. Nehemiah Salakia taking other bad women. I think it's Nehemiah 13. Yeah, I figured that 13 and 27. Let me go to 13 and 26. Matter of fact, Salakia. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna get the summary of Nehemiah 13. What was the summary? Just kind of get through this kind of quickly. But yeah, I mean, okay. It says, Salakia, give me 1 second. All right, so I found my part. This is Nehemiah 13 and 23. In those days also saw I the Jews, the Israelites, that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and in Moab, and their children spake half in speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the language of Jews' language, which was Hebrew, but according to the language of each people. So, proving the point, I don't even want to get into this whole thing with because we can deal with other nations of the women. So you got a lot of them bug outs that don't understand that, but that's a whole nother very complex lesson. And we would have in the kingdom, we're going to have women, wives of other nations. They're going to be concubines, right? So 13 and 27, I'm just trying to prove the point that the Israelites was dealing with other nation women back then. This always been a thing. So to me, the children are gonna come out looking like they're like those nation of women they went on to. And you had the Jake men, like, in the military. The Jake men would go to these different countries like Vietnam, so on and so forth, and deal with the women over there. They would lay with them, have babies, and some of them, a lot of those babies not gonna look like the standard so-called black man, right? It is case by case. Even though we do have that dominant gene, but you're gonna have cases when they look like a heathen, but they still an Israelite because you are what your father is. All right. So let's get more into this. And anybody that don't understand that, I mean, bugged out, man. All right. So let me get into the elder video. Then I'm gonna get into the lesson. Check this out. Salaki, 1 second. So we're gonna need to depend on the Lord for a period of time. But here's the beautiful part of that. When they set this into motion, these men who are the devil, which means adversary, human adversary, right? When they checkmate society, checkmates them. So without any further ado, he will finish the last part of my video. The point will be made. And this one is called Christians Hate These Biblical Truths. And they do. Alright? And I say subscribe, be edified. This brother, I like his style of teaching. He goes hard. Bro, these Christians are mad as hell. They're just leaving comments non-stop on all the videos. It's like, if we're not teaching the truth, why are you so mad? I'm not mad. Because we're all coming to find out that everything the Christian church has taught us over the years is all bullshit. Yep. Okay, I want you to listen in closely, because this brother right here is going to hit a lot of strongholds, and he's going to hit a lot of pressure points of Christianity in this short video. There's no such thing as a literal hell. There's no such thing as a literal virgin birth. Yeah, so the hell doctrine is big among Jake, and then they believe in the Immaculate Conception. So we can tell you knuckleheads that's outside the truth. Ain't no such thing as hell, right? But these knuckleheads, since they've been in doctrine to believe this, they gonna believe it anyway, because they stupid. And let me say this too. You got all these figures of speech that you learned in this place. Like Jacob says, it's hot as hell outside. So you're insinuating that you still subscribe to this, even if you're doing it unconsciously. Because a lot of Jakes don't really understand what they say. They just say it out of habit because they've been hearing these phrases ever since they was a child. When you say it's hot as hell, a lot of other phrases. All right, that's going back into Christianity, which you've been taught. So you got to think before you talk.
Easter is not in the Bible. Christmas is not in the Bible.
Yeah, that's another one, Easter, right? So when you actually go into the word Easter, it's actually talking about the Passover. It ain't got nothing to do with no goddamn Easter bunny. That's a pagan concept that came from ancient Babylon, with Isatar. I'm gonna do a lesson on that just to do a refresher for people that's waking up, that's new to this. But there's no such thing as no Easter bunny in the Bible. That's a fertility goddess named Ishtar, or Ishtar. That's how you got Easter.
Yes, you have to keep the laws of the Old Testament. Yes, reincarnation is in the Bible.
And you Christians are saved. You living in sin and you're tired of sinning. But this ain't got nothing to do with you. The law was only given to the Israelites. Them the only people that made a covenant with Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shah, God as you know. So you Christians that say that, I mean, you don't know, you out of your mind. You insane. The law was given unto the Israelites. Now we're not going to be justified but saved by the law, right? And let me say it like this: we're not going to be saved by the law. Let me just keep it simple. Now, some, because it said, Revelations, I think that's 14 and 13, those who keep the commandments and faith in Yahweh Shah. But ultimately, we rest in Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shah for our salvation. It's not going to be done by the working of the law. But in no wise and no means is the law done away with. Going back into the book of Romans 3 and 31, do we make void the law through faith? God forbid we establish a law. So how would you know what's righteous and what's wicked? The law is what the measure is.
There is no such thing as a Trinity. Okay.
Yeah, that's another
the Son
one.
of God, Yahweh Shah.
Yeah, so the Trinity false doctrine is I've actually did lessons on that they say the Holy Spirit, the Messiah, and the Most High, as they call God, is all co-equal. And they supposed to be the same stock, same essence or whatever. No, Yahweh created Yahweh Shah. First Spirit created, and then the angels and so on and so forth. So that's a false doctrine that was created by the Roman Catholic Church.
Is called the Son of God. His name ain't Sweet Jeebus. He's the Son of God. And the Lord's a so-called black man with woolly hair. He's not a so-called white man. The fake Jews living in the state of Israel.
Did you hear that? That's include Yahweh. So this Jake right here get it. He just don't look like the typical Jake. But he get it. He got more understanding than you so-called black only Israelites. Right? If you want to do the skin tone thing, it's not a skin tone thing. This is a Israelite bloodline thing, and that's what you have to understand. When the mind becomes more spiritual, you get that understanding. But if you're looking at things in the carnal flesh, you're not gonna get it. All right, so look, this truth has been established that the Lord is a so-called black man, and that's an understanding that invades the understanding of the world, even though it's clearly written in the Bible. But they don't want to acknowledge that because now that's going to undo the whole institution of white so-called Christianity, a very racist, hateful institution that you, Jake, still flock to. You still support, whether you do it knowingly or unknowingly, right? So, a little bit more. All right, you can read it.
But the Christians worship them devils. And Satan and the angels never got kicked out of heaven in the book of Genesis. That's more fairy tales.
Yeah, that's fairy tales, like he say, like the brother saying. But that was given to you by these Edomites, and you don't want to believe this. There was out there. I did a lesson on that poem. John Milton. Look it up, and then he's gonna go into a lot of other false doctrine. I might do a part 2 on this lesson, but hopefully this has been edifying. Call Halah Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai Bahashem Rachat Kodash. Shalom.